So recently, the trailer for Wish came out and it got me cautiously optimistic for the movie. Not that I hated it anyway, I actually like the fact that it's taken a new design, but there are concerns that I have about the movie as a whole. Of course, I haven't seen the movie and not know the whole synopsis, but there are things that overall within the style of what they're trying to go for look a little off to me, and I just want to explain why compared to the past. Because don't get me wrong, this overall new change actually represents something great that Disney can actually do that takes it away from most of the revival era animation that has been stagnant and more of the samey-ish, more connected to each other, where recently we have seen other animation studios such as Sony and of course DreamWorks taken to this new style, the Spider-Verse style of course, to new heights, and seeing that within the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as well, going on that edge of animation to do something a little bit different. You know, the mantra that Walt Disney himself actually did way back then when he created Snow White and went on forth to use many technological leaps in animation that made his story stand out. And this story of Wish is meant to actually represent as the movie that comes out 100 years later after the founding of Disney itself. And of course, that's great. And of course, there is also the important fact that there looks like there is going to be a main villain for the course of this film, which is really great and something we needed that hasn't been in Disney since 2012 at this point, and that is disappointing. But the other things I want to talk about here is how the style of the characters look. Like, it looks more geared towards, you know, a Disney Junior or a Disney Channel TV show rather than a Disney animated film. Like, if you look at the style, compare and contrast something like maybe Encanto a few years ago to something like Wish that comes out later this year, it kind of looks a little bit more tame in animation. Like, a lot of people actually say that Wish actually looks in the style of Sofia the First, which I actually concur with them, and it really looks like that, and that is something you don't want when you actually go in to watch a full-length Disney animated feature film. Something we've seen in the case of what Strange Worlds brought us though in the last few months of last year, where you can actually see and you can actually feel that even though it was a box office disappointment, you could still feel that it had that sort of style that would be for theatrical releases. This, however, does not feel like that in any way from what I've seen. But I will give them credit for the world. The background and the watercolor and the artwork of this 2D style looks breathtakingly stunning and something clearly different from the other style of past Disney films at this point in time, which I really love. But for the characters of this film, it looks really unfinished in the style that they want to present. I mean, to explain a little bit more about my point is to go back to actually 2012 with the release of this short Paperman, one of the best shorts I've ever seen that was actually released by Disney, that the style clearly is 3D and 2D and how you could feel that. And I want to compare that to how one of the directors of this film says she's excited about honoring Walt Disney with this feature and how the art and technology team come together to figure out how to combine the 20th century illustration look that inspired Walt Disney with the CG technology we have now. Which of course, looking back on it, Walt Disney would love to have that CG style to present a new story with what they did in this era of animation. But of course, the style that they are presenting doesn't look, you know, sort of up to date to the standards that we expect from other things like the Spider-Verse and how that actually performed. I mean, that kind of film is the type of style that I would think Walt Disney would like if he actually lived long enough to see that to technologically advance such films. And of course, going back to Paperman, you can actually feel that. How the story is like set in the 1940s and how you can feel that with that black and white, like the worlds are actually being blent well. When you actually go through the short, like you can actually feel that it is 2D while being 3D simultaneously, and how this actually just feels unfinished to me. That's not to say there's anything wrong that's going to be devolved with the story, because I do have high hopes for it, especially the fact that we have a clear villain that will be played by Chris Pines, the most important thing that we have to actually derive from when it comes to a newer Disney film. But overall, I'm still kind of getting this feeling like this isn't the type of thing that I would see in a movie coming from a studio like Disney. But of course, you're also coming into this like, I want to see it because Disney is actually doing something new and harkening back to their older styles of 2D animation, clearly by these drawn out styles that the film tries to represent. But other than that, the film isn't giving me reason to explain that this is a Disney animated feature film that I would go see. I'm at this point in time where I want them to actually go back to traditional 2D animation that I missed most, that ended with The Princess and the Frog, which still showed Disney's ability to create this style, but they just executively they moved their decisions to create 3D instead, which is not a bad thing, but I'm just missing that sort of piece, and doing this is just half-hearted to me. It's like they want to stick with the new 3D style, which is okay, but they also want to harken back to the 2D style, like I actually featured previously, to harken back to Walt Disney and such, which is great, but combining that in this sort of way just just feels more unfinished to me, if you know what I mean. But there just is a lot to love about what this trailer is presenting overall as well. I mean, overall it still does look better than anything the live-action Little Mermaid movie is going to produce, but this is just my initial thoughts about what this movie represents, being the one that comes out 100 years celebrating that whole entire time span of Disney that started out with simple cartoons, transitioned into Snow White with a big length feature animated film, where this one is representing that culmination all coming together, which I just feel like doesn't do enough to actually satisfy that. It's just that I'm at this point where Disney gives me mixed feelings. I hate the corporation as a whole, but I still love these stories and I can't wait to see something like this is going to actually produce. After all, this is also being directed by the guy who brought us the Frozen films and of course Surf's Up, which I actually loved. So with all taking those points of view, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I should be excited for what Disney is now trying to do with their animation department, but not excited enough when it doesn't feel like up to par to the groundbreaking edges that of course they're trying to capture with what Walt Disney did back in his time, as this film with Wish celebrates that and the ideals where you wish upon a star, your dreams come true. And I just think we've just been filled spoiled by these other new groundbreaking animation films that have become masterpieces in their own right, like Puss in Boots and of course the Spider-Verse, and it's just hard to come by with that opinion when Disney itself has been releasing mediocre products over this last few years, which is just hard to actually come up with, even from such a big organization as themselves, and it's just a wait and see situation at this point. Like, they have everything down from the backgrounds, but the main focal points of this very movie is the main concern that comes within this movie. The story might be good, but the style that they're going for and the style that they have been presenting for the last few years shows us otherwise that is to be worried about, which is the case for most modern Disney films, I guess. But I just thought I'd share some random thoughts with you on that particular situation, and I cannot wait for what happens when it comes out. But seriously though, Disney, I am not convinced that you're making some great changes to your animation when your characters look like something out of a Disney Junior short. Please, for the love of God, actually create a full-length film like in the style of Paperman, or of course just make another 2D traditional animated film. Other than that, that's all I really have to add on this situation. I'm all done, so goodbye.